Welcome back. Episode 2 of me talking to myself. Today, subject of today's talking to myself is why you shouldn't put faith in scientists. Don't put faith in scientists, and don't put too much weight on scientific theory or in any sort of scientific subject. Don't think of science as the filter through which everything needs to be judged. Science is not a tradition. You shouldn't think of science as a body of knowledge. Science is not a body of knowledge. Science is an outlook. Scientific thinking is a perspective philosophy that was sort of, I guess you could say, was coined around in ancient Greece. Is where the first philosophies of trying to view the world in the most objective way possible began, through the lens of reason. And all it really entails is don't believe anything until you yourself have experienced what the person is talking about, and everything is up for critique. Everything is up for critique. There's no inherent truth in scientific thinking besides at least the thought that thinking scientifically is the most practical way to live, or the most objective way to think and live, and will give you the best systems of thought for dealing with the world in a productive way. And that, of course, gives birth to the method of testing. It's good to do as many tests as possible to make sure that the results that you got weren't a fluke, or if they were a fluke, to understand the probability of certain events happening from whatever the hell you're looking at or dealing with. Because if you were to think of science more as a body of knowledge, like people, standing on the shoulders of giants, some people like to say, then you sort of romanticize beliefs that already exist that you might not even have any experience of for yourself, of what they're talking about. And so let's think about these two ways of thinking in separate metaphors. Let's say one way, the way of viewing science and scientific discoveries and scientists as the sort of bedrock of how you should think is like staring at a map. Let's say you're walking through the woods and someone gives you a map, and you've never been in the woods before, so you need this map. It's a very handy map. It can become handy. And you stare at the map and you get so lost in the map that you begin to think that the world around you is structured by the map, or that you completely forget about the world and you take the map as the thing itself. And these are like the terms and the devices that we use to measure our surrounding environment. It's kind of like just trying to map out a forest, and none of the markings or words or keys on the map are really there physically. Like, you can't eat the word apple, you can't drink the word water, you can't climb the word mountain, but they're keys and little tidbit words, like an alphabet, to try and give us a way to communicate to other people what we're dealing with and what we're seeing. People tend to have a habit of trusting trusting people when they say that something has been scientifically proven or something that's already been studied by the science. We have the data. The data says that flavocarbazepine reduces the risk of a heart attack by 50% in people over the age of 50 by our specialists, or say like some fucking oil company comes out with their board of scientists to say that there really no danger is really posed in the usage of this new method of extracting fuel. Why shouldn't you trust those people? Because there's a lot of fucking money involved. Those scientists, their jobs depend on making the company look good. They aren't thinking like scientists. They're not thinking like real scientists. They're thinking more like politicians. They have the aura and the energy, or the presentation of someone who's a scientist, but in reality they're really just sort of arms for a machine that wants grubs, that wants monies, and that needs to compete with other organizations to survive and do as best as they can. And they don't really care as much about what they're saying, about whether what they're saying is true or beneficial for the society as a whole, in as much as it gets them to the next quarter. And in an economy where the most successful person is the one who has the next financial edge, and nothing's really based on ethics, then the most psychotic companies will always manage up on top. And that's easily shown in the mental health demographics of CEOs and people at very high positions in our economy, because, like, you know, if you're not willing to do something that'll give you an edge over someone else because it's morally reprehensible, then someone else out there is, and they're not going to be held accountable by anybody, because success is the game. So yes, companies do, and this is, I think the majority of science is probably either under the pressure of A, being politically correct, not upsetting anybody. There is an ideological plane which everything has to match up with, and that's a sort of liberalist thinking. And B, money, profit. And I might get into this in another episode of me walking and talking to myself in the woods, but our culture is very much curtailed and woven to fit the sort of economy that we're living in. And that'll be another episode. But back to why you should always look at science with a squinted eye, because it's very fashionable for people, especially people who are very interested in science, to amass knowledge or to read a lot of material in subjects talking about things that they have never even seen in their entire life, because they feel good and they feel like they look good in front of other people when they show them how smart they sound when they talk about them. You think that the crow belongs in the what family? Pfft, stupid. Everyone knows that they're corvids, you fucking idiot. You know, like that kind of thing. Like, that's congratulations, your head is filled with more useless knowledge than the other guy, and you just made yourself look like an asshole. People think of scientists, these people who are the ones, like in the modern day, they're the ones who are exploring the unknown. They're the ones who are going out and fishing out for things that we haven't seen yet. So they're kind of like our eyes for us in terms of what reality really looks like. So we think of them like priests. We think of them a lot of the time in our world, kind of like people thought of priests in the Middle Ages, where the priests were these sort of ordained people who had permission from the authorities and permission from everybody to be the ones to go out into the mental unknown and to map out what's really there and bring it back to everyone else so that it can benefit them. That system was always perverted, and priests would and yogis and whatnot would not use that knowledge to really help and grow society into something better, but would use that knowledge that other people aren't aware of to really just tame them and control them. That sort of paradigm of thinking is very unhealthy because it also constricts the dignity of individual perspective. Everyone's perspective should probably, you should think of your own individual perspective and what you see as your ultimate guide and how you feel about what you see, because that's the original scientific mode of thinking. Is don't just believe what the dude's saying. Try and either verify it for yourself, keep it in question. Don't just assume that they're right and that they should be the ones to have the get-go to control whatever it is because they're trained. And that's what a lot of university today is. It's just that we're not equipping people to think like scientists because there's already all that sort of work's already been done. We already have that. We already have the right worldview for this. We're just going to train you. We're just going to train you properly to be an arm of the current existing system. The Catholic Church made reason and thought so naughty for the longest time in order to maintain order that people just went overboard with romanticizing about what we could do with it, because now we're free to think for ourselves and reason for ourselves, think of how much good we'll be able to do, and we've just sort of managed to create a pile of shit culture.